Flight attendant Heather roughly escorts 16-year-old Jamal Washington from first class. Jamal protests, waving his valid ticket while passengers stare judgmentally. A white businessman smirks as Jamal is forced toward economy. Tears of anger burn his eyes as he discreetly texts someone. The countdown begins, 15 minutes until everything changes. Before we dive into this powerful story, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below. If this story of injustice and redemption resonates with you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories that expose uncomfortable truths in our society. Now, let's rewind to see how Jamal's morning began. Jamal Washington woke up at 5 a.m., too excited to sleep any longer. Today wasn't just any Saturday, it was the culmination of 3 years of exceptional academic performance. The acceptance letter from MIT's prestigious summer STEM program for exceptional high school students lay on his nightstand, still looking as crisp as the day it arrived 2 months ago. He'd read it so many times he could recite it from memory. "You got this," Jamal whispered to himself as he moved through his morning routine with careful precision. His suitcase had been packed for days, button-down shirts, khakis, and one suit for the final presentation. Nothing flashy, just professional and neat, exactly as his father had taught him. Downstairs, Trinity Washington was already in the kitchen, preparing a hearty breakfast despite the early hour. The aroma of French toast, Jamal's favorite, filled the air. "You didn't have to get up, Mom," Jamal said, dropping a kiss on her cheek. "My baby's flying alone for the first time." "Of course I'm up," Trinity replied, sliding a plate in front of him. Her smile couldn't quite mask the worry in her eyes. "I wish your father or I could fly with you." "Dad's meeting me there tomorrow," Jamal reminded her between bites. "Besides, I'm 16. Plenty of kids my age fly alone." Trinity sighed, resting her hand on her son's shoulder. "It's not about your age, sweetheart. It's about, I know, Mom." Jamal's voice softened. They'd had this conversation before. As one of only 12 black students at Westlake Academy, Jamal understood the talk all too well. How to behave around authorities, how to minimize threats, how to prove his innocence for crimes he hadn't committed. "First-class ticket or not, some people will only see my skin," Jamal finished. "Dad already covered this. That's why he got me the first-class ticket, remember? Said no one can question whether I belong if I'm in the front of the plane." Trinity smiled sadly. Derrick Washington had worked his way up from nothing to become CEO of Washington Tech Solutions, one of the fastest-growing software security companies in the country. He shielded his family from most of the racism he still encountered, but he'd been explicit in his preparations for Jamal's trip. What neither Trinity nor Jamal knew was that Derrick had arranged his business trip to coincide with Jamal's program. He planned to surprise his son by attending his final presentation at MIT. Similarly, Jamal had secretly arranged to visit his father's hotel on the first night, eager to show his independence by navigating Boston on his own. At 6:30 a.m., Derrick appeared in the kitchen doorway, car keys in hand. "All set, champ?" he asked, his deep voice resonating with pride. Jamal nodded, standing to his full height of 6 feet 1 inch, the same as his father. At 16, he was already drawing looks from college recruiters for both his academic and athletic abilities. "Remember," Derrick said as they loaded the car, "you've earned your place in that program and on that plane. Walk with your head high." "Yes, sir," Jamal replied, the familiar mantra settling into his bones. The drive to Dallas, Fort Worth International Airport was filled with last-minute advice and reminders. Derrick's phone rang twice with business calls, which he declined. "Nothing more important today than getting you off safely," he told Jamal with a wink. At the departures terminal, Derrick handed Jamal his premium luggage and first-class ticket. "Text when you land," Derrick said, embracing his son tightly. "I've got meetings all day, but I'll check my phone whenever I can." "Will do," Jamal promised, feeling a surge of both excitement and nervousness. Inside the terminal, Jamal's first hint that his father's precautions might not be enough came at the security checkpoint. Despite his first-class boarding pass, he was pulled aside for random additional screening. The TSA agent, a middle-aged man with thinning hair, examined his student ID and boarding pass multiple times. "MIT program, huh?" the agent said, his tone suggesting skepticism. "Yes, sir," Jamal replied, keeping his voice respectful and even. "It's a summer STEM program for high school students." The agent waved him through after an additional bag check that none of the businessmen ahead of him had received. At the gate, Jamal waited patiently for first-class boarding to be called. When it was, he approached the gate agent, a blonde woman whose nameplate read, Cameron. "Boarding pass?" she asked without looking up. Jamal handed it over. Cameron scanned it, then frowned. "This is for first class," she stated. "Yes, ma'am," Jamal confirmed politely. "Are you sure you're at the right gate?" she asked, finally looking up and taking in Jamal's appearance. "Yes, ma'am. Boston, Flight 1422, First Class, Seat 3A. Cameron's eyes narrowed slightly. She scanned the boarding pass again, then reluctantly handed it back. "Very well," she said, her tone suggesting she'd solved a minor mystery. "Enjoy your flight." Jamal boarded the plane with his head high, following his father's instruction. The first-class cabin was half full, mostly with older white men in business attire. A few glanced up as he passed, their expressions ranging from neutral to surprised to disapproving. Finding seat 3A, Jamal stowed his backpack and settled in, immediately appreciating the extra legroom his 6'1" frame required. He was just getting comfortable when a shadow fell across his seat. "Excuse me," said a voice tight with forced politeness. "I think you might be in the wrong section." Jamal looked up to see flight attendant Heather, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I'm in seat 3A, Jamal said calmly, holding up his boarding pass. "First class." Heather's professionally fixed smile faltered slightly as she took the boarding pass. She examined it with unusual scrutiny, turning it over as if expecting to find evidence of forgery. "How did you get a first-class ticket?" she asked, her tone suggesting this was an anomaly requiring explanation. Jamal felt a familiar tightness in his chest, the sensation that always accompanied these moments of blatant prejudice. He'd felt it during school tournaments when security guards asked if he was really a student athlete. He'd felt it at the mall when store clerks followed him but not his white friends. "My father purchased it," he answered, keeping his voice even, remembering his parents' advice, "Never show anger. Always stay calm." "And who is your father?" Heather pressed, her eyebrows raised. Before Jamal could answer, a white man in his 50s leaned across the aisle. His designer suit and gold watch screamed old money, and his expression of entitled annoyance made Jamal's stomach clench. "Is there a problem here?" the man asked, not looking at Jamal but addressing Heather directly. "I paid for a quiet, comfortable flight." "No problem, Mr. Bradshaw," Heather assured him. "I'm just confirming this young man's seating assignment." Tyler Bradshaw glanced at Jamal with thinly veiled contempt. "Well, it's obvious there's been some mistake. This section is for premium passengers." "I am a premium passenger," Jamal stated, struggling to maintain his composure. "I have a valid first-class ticket for this seat." Another flight attendant, Brian, approached. "Everything okay here, Heather?" "This young man claims to have a first-class ticket," she explained, still holding Jamal's boarding pass. "It does scan correctly, but..." "But what?" Jamal asked, his patience wearing thin. "My ticket is valid. I've shown it to the gate agent, it was scanned properly, and I'm sitting in my assigned seat." Brian, at least, had the decency to look uncomfortable. "It's just unusual for someone your age to be traveling alone in first class." "Would it be unusual if I were white?" The words escaped before Jamal could stop them. A hush fell over the nearby passengers. Tyler Bradshaw made a sound of disgust. "Now see here," he interjected. "There's no need to play the race card. This is about maintaining the standards of first class." Jamal felt his face growing hot. Discreetly, he pulled out his phone and opened the camera app, placing it on his lap with the lens facing upward, another piece of advice from his father. "I'm traveling to Boston for MIT's summer STEM program," Jamal explained, trying a different approach. "My father thought first class would be more comfortable for me to prepare my materials during the flight." "MIT?" Bradshaw scoffed. "Now I know there's been a mistake." Heather consulted her tablet. "Let me check the manifest again. Sometimes there are computer errors with seat assignments." "There's no error," Jamal insisted, frustration mounting. "May I have my boarding pass back, please?" As Heather reluctantly handed it back, the captain emerged from the cockpit. His name badge read, Maxwell. "Is there an issue delaying our departure?" he asked. Heather leaned in and whispered something to Captain Maxwell, who glanced at Jamal with an unreadable expression. "Young man," the captain addressed him, "I understand there's some confusion about your seating assignment." "There's no confusion, sir," Jamal replied. "I have a valid ticket for seat 3A. We've had some complaints," Maxwell continued, lowering his voice. "Perhaps it would be better if what?" Jamal asked, the familiar injustice of the situation making his voice crack slightly. "If I move to the back where I belong?" The captain's face hardened. "That's not what I said. But as captain, I have final authority over passenger seating for safety and comfort reasons." "You're removing me because I'm black," Jamal stated plainly, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. His phone continued recording. "No one said anything about race," Heather interjected quickly. "This is about proper procedure." A security officer appeared at the cabin entrance. His badge read, Keith. "Is there a problem here?" Keith asked, his hand resting on his belt. Captain Maxwell nodded. "We need to reseat a passenger before departure." Jamal looked around the cabin, seeking any ally, any face that might show concern or outrage at what was happening. Most passengers averted their eyes. A few watched with uncomfortable expressions. Tyler Bradshaw smiled slightly. "Fine," Jamal said, gathering his backpack. "But I want it noted that I'm being removed from my rightfully purchased seat without cause." As he stood, Jamal's hands trembled slightly. He opened his text messages and quickly typed a message to his father. "Dad, being kicked out of first class for no reason. Recorded everything. Flight 1422. He added a broken heart emoji, something he'd never normally send his father, then pressed send as Officer Keith escorted him toward economy. The humiliation burned through him like fire as he walked past rows of staring passengers. But beneath the shame, something else burned even hotter, his father's words from that morning. "You've earned your place. 15 minutes. That's how long it would take before everything changed." As Jamal was escorted toward the back of the plane, the first-class cabin hummed with uncomfortable silence. In seat 4B, Stephanie Morris, a corporate attorney, stared out the window, her reflection showing the frown lines between her eyebrows. She had witnessed the entire exchange but had remained silent, her Harvard law degree and human rights advocacy apparently checked with her luggage. "This isn't right," she whispered to herself, too softly for anyone to hear. Her fingers hovered over her phone, considering whether to record what had happened, but the moment had passed. The guilt settled in her stomach like a stone. Across the aisle in seat 4C, Doris Jenkins, a 70-year-old retired schoolteacher, made no attempt to hide her disapproval. As Heather passed her seat, Doris reached out and grasped the flight attendant's wrist. "I taught for 45 years in public schools," Doris said, her voice wavering but clear. "What you just did to that young man is exactly what I fought against my entire career." Heather's smile tightened. "Ma'am, it was a seating issue, nothing more. Can I get you a pre-flight beverage?" "You can get me your supervisor when we land," Doris replied, releasing her grip and turning pointedly toward the window. In seat 3B, adjacent to where Jamal had been seated, Tyler Bradshaw was already making himself comfortable, spreading out his Financial Times and briefcase. "Thank goodness that's resolved," he murmured to the man across the aisle. "First class has standards for a reason. Kid probably used his daddy's miles without permission." The other businessman nodded uncomfortably but didn't respond. Bradshaw, taking this as agreement, continued, "You know how it is these days. Everyone crying discrimination when they don't get special treatment." Meanwhile, Heather was efficiently reorganizing the cabin, offering warm towels and taking drink orders as if nothing unusual had happened. When another passenger inquired about the empty seat next to Bradshaw, she explained smoothly, "We have a standby passenger being processed now." Sure enough, minutes later, a middle-aged white woman in a business suit was escorted to seat 3A, Jamal's seat, with profuse apologies for the delay. In economy class, Jamal stood in the aisle as flight attendants hurried past, seemingly too busy to help him find a seat. The plane was fully booked, with only middle seats in the back remaining. Passengers looked up curiously, some with sympathy, others with annoyance at the delay he represented. In row 23, Aisha Johnson, a 22-year-old college student, recognized what was happening immediately. As a young black woman who had experienced similar treatment, she stood up from her aisle seat. "You can have my seat," she offered Jamal quietly. "I saw what happened up front." Jamal shook his head, his pride still smarting. "Thank you, but no. I don't need charity. I need justice." "It's not charity," Aisha insisted. "It's solidarity." Before Jamal could respond, a flight attendant approached. "Sir, you need to take a seat so we can depart. There's an open middle seat in row 28. "Actually," Jamal replied, his voice steady despite his churning emotions, "I'd prefer to stand. FAA regulations permit standing until the aircraft door is closed and the seatbelt sign is illuminated." The flight attendant's eyes widened slightly at his knowledge of regulations. "Very well, but you'll need to be seated soon." Throughout the cabin, passengers were watching the interaction. Several had their phones out, recording discreetly. The tension in the air was palpable, with whispered conversations sprouting in Jamal's wake. "Did you see how they treated that kid? First class kicked him out because he's black. Someone should say something." But no one did, at least not to the flight crew. Instead, they posted to social media, sent text messages, or simply watched uncomfortably as institutional racism played out in the confined space of the aircraft. At the gate, the departure time ticked past. The jetway door remained open as the gate agent's phone rang with increasing urgency. Cameron, who had initially questioned Jamal's first-class ticket, answered with a professional greeting that quickly morphed into concern. "Yes, sir." "No, sir. I wasn't aware of." "Yes, he's still on board as far as I know." "Of course, right away, sir." She hung up, her face pale, and grabbed the intercom microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. We're experiencing a situation that requires immediate attention. Please stand by." Back in first class, Tyler Bradshaw checked his watch impatiently. "What's the holdup now? Some of us have important meetings to get to." Heather, passing with a tray of champagne, offered him a placating smile. "Just a minor issue at the gate, Mr. Bradshaw. We should be underway shortly." What Heather didn't know, what none of the crew yet realized, was that the minor issue was 6 feet 1 inch tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, and currently striding down the jetway with the determined gait of a man who controlled not just his own destiny, but potentially the careers of everyone involved in his son's humiliation. In the back of the plane, Jamal felt his phone vibrate. A text message from his father consisted of just 3 words, "I'm coming aboard." Derrick Washington was in the middle of a critical meeting with potential investors when his phone vibrated in his pocket. Normally, he would never check messages during such an important discussion, but something, paternal instinct perhaps, made him discreetly glance at the screen under the conference table. His son's message hit him like a physical blow. Dad, being kicked out of first class for no reason. Recorded everything. Flight 1422. The broken heart emoji. Something his stoic, proud son would never normally use, told Derrick everything he needed to know about Jamal's emotional state. "Gentlemen," Derrick said, rising abruptly from the table, "I need to call a brief recess. Family emergency." Without waiting for a response from the startled investors, he strode from the room, already dialing his assistant. "Catherine, I need you to call Atlantic Airways. Get me the name of everyone working first class on flight 1422 to Boston, departing now. Then get me the head of operations for DFW Airport on the phone. I'm heading there immediately. Sir, your meeting, cancel everything. My son needs me." Have you ever experienced that moment when you knew exactly what needed to be done, when protecting someone you love overrode every other priority? Type 1 in the comments if you drop everything for your child like Derrick did. Hit that like button if you believe racism should be confronted head-on rather than endured in silence. Would you have spoken up if you were a passenger witnessing Jamal's mistreatment? Let me know in the comments below. But what happens when a powerful man like Derrick Washington, who normally navigates racism with calculated diplomacy, unleashes his full fury? Keep watching to see how one father's rage transforms an airline's culture in 15 minutes flat. As his driver broke speed limits across Dallas, Derrick's mind flashed back to his own experiences with racism. Experiences he'd worked tirelessly to shield Jamal from. Despite building a tech empire worth billions, despite his tailored suits and executive title, despite his philanthropy and board positions, Derrick still faced store clerks who followed him, restaurant hosts who claimed no reservations were available, and country club members who mistook him for staff. He had taught Jamal to handle racism with dignity, to be twice as good to get half as far. But in this moment, watching the text message replay in his mind, Derrick questioned whether his approach had been right. Perhaps dignity wasn't enough. Perhaps power needed to be wielded like a sword sometimes, not just carried like a shield. His car screeched to a halt at the departures terminal. Without waiting for his driver, Derrick burst through the doors, his 6'1" frame commanding attention in his impeccably tailored Tom Ford suit. His normally warm brown eyes had hardened to obsidian. At the premium check-in counter, the agent barely glanced up. "Boarding pass and ID, please." "I need to speak with your supervisor immediately," Derrick stated, his deep voice resonating with authority. The agent looked up, prepared to deliver the standard line about procedures, but something in Derrick's expression made her reach for the phone instead. "Name, sir?" "Derrick Washington." Her eyes widened slightly, recognition dawning. "The Derrick Washington of Washington Tech Solutions." "The same. And a 30% shareholder in Meridian Global, your parent company." Within minutes, Derrick was surrounded by increasingly senior airline staff. Dennis Parker, the airline's operations manager, arrived breathless. "Mr. Washington, what seems to be the issue?" "My son, Jamal Washington, is on flight 1422 to Boston. He was removed from his first-class seat due to what I can only assume is racial profiling. I intend to board that plane immediately." Dennis paled. "Sir, FAA regulations don't allow, don't quote regulations to me, Dennis. I sit on the Transportation Secretary's advisory board. What I want right now is access to that aircraft, a full investigation into what happened, and the names of every employee involved." As if sensing the futility of resistance, Dennis nodded to his staff. "Get Mr. Washington a gate pass. Alert the captain of 1422 that we have a situation." Minutes later, Derrick was striding down the jetway, a small entourage of nervous airline executives in his wake. His mind was focused on one thing only, his son. Derrick Washington had built his empire by being measured and strategic, by choosing his battles carefully. But some things transcended business strategy. Some things demanded righteous fury. And anyone who humiliated his son was about to experience that fury firsthand. The cabin fell silent as Derrick Washington stepped aboard, his presence commanding attention before he'd said a word. At 6'1", with broad shoulders filling out his custom Navy suit, he projected authority in a way that made heads turn and conversations halt mid-sentence. Captain Maxwell emerged from the cockpit, his professional smile faltering as he registered the small group of airline executives trailing behind Derrick like anxious courtiers. "Sir, I'm afraid unauthorized personnel can't be on board during, I'm Derrick Washington," he interrupted, his voice calm but carrying throughout the hushed cabin. "CEO of Washington Tech Solutions and major shareholder in your parent company, Meridian Global. My son, Jamal Washington, was removed from his first-class seat without cause. I'd like an explanation." Maxwell's face drained of color. "Mr. Washington, I wasn't aware." There was a seating confusion there was no confusion, Derrick cut in. "My son had a valid first-class ticket for seat 3A, purchased by me. Flight attendant Heather and security officer Keith removed him because he didn't fit their profile of who belongs in first class." At the mention of her name, Heather froze in the aisle, a bottle of champagne poised over a passenger's glass. Brian, the other flight attendant, seemed to shrink behind the galley curtain. "Sir," Maxwell attempted again, "passenger comfort is our priority, and there were complaints." "Complaints about what, exactly?" Derrick's voice dropped dangerously. "About my son's appearance? His skin color?" "Please, Captain Maxwell, articulate exactly what my son did to warrant removal from his rightfully purchased seat." The silence that followed was deafening. Passengers in first class shifted uncomfortably. In seat 3A, Jamal's original seat, the standby passenger stared fixedly at her lap. "Dennis," Derrick addressed the operations manager without taking his eyes off the captain, "I want the security footage from this aircraft and gate area for the past hour. Catherine will provide you with my attorney's contact information." Tyler Bradshaw, who had been watching the exchange with growing alarm, suddenly stood up. "Now see here," he blustered, "this is causing an unnecessary delay. Some of us have important meetings in Boston." Derrick turned slowly to face him. "And you are?" "Tyler Bradshaw, Senior VP at Lancaster Financial. I was simply concerned about maintaining the standards of first class when you saw a young black man in a seat you felt he didn't deserve," Derrick finished for him. "Mr. Bradshaw, did you know that my company, Washington Tech Solutions, provides the security infrastructure for 8 of the 10 largest financial institutions in America, including Lancaster Financial?" Bradshaw blanched. "I wasn't aware, clearly," Derrick said coldly. "You should also be aware that your CEO, Howard Lancaster, sits with me on the Minority Business Leadership Council. I'm having dinner with him next Thursday. I wonder what he'd think about your behavior today." Bradshaw sank back into his seat, suddenly fascinated by his shoes. Derrick turned his attention to the rest of the first-class cabin. "I'd like to know who else complained about my son's presence." No hands raised. No eyes met his. "I see," Derrick nodded. "Courage of conviction seems in short supply today." He pulled out a tablet that his assistant had thrust into his hands before he boarded. "I'm reviewing the security footage now. It seems several of you witnessed my son's mistreatment but chose to remain silent." On the screen, Derrick could clearly see Jamal presenting his ticket, Heather's dismissive response, Bradshaw's interference, and the painful walk of shame as his son was escorted toward economy. In seat 4B, Stephanie Morris finally found her voice. "Mr. Washington, I witnessed what happened to your son. It was wrong, and I should have spoken up. I'm a civil rights attorney, and I failed to live my values today. I'm truly sorry." Doris Jenkins, the elderly teacher, raised her hand. "I did speak up, young man. I told that flight attendant exactly what I thought of her behavior. In my day, we called it what it was, segregation. From the back of the plane, a flight attendant appeared, leading Jamal forward. The teenager walked with his head high, despite the visible emotion in his eyes. When he saw his father, surprise registered on his face, followed by profound relief. "Dad? What are you doing here?" Derrick embraced his son tightly. "Making things right." Over the cabin speakers, a voice announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dennis Parker, Operations Manager for Atlantic Airways. We apologize for the delay. We're experiencing a staffing adjustment that requires attention before departure. Several crew members are being replaced. We appreciate your patience." Heather's face crumpled as she realized the implications. Brian looked equally stricken. Captain Maxwell stared straight ahead, his jaw tight. "Mr. Washington," Dennis said quietly, "we have a new crew en route. They'll be here within 30 minutes. In the meantime, we'd like to offer your son our sincere apologies and, of course, return him to his rightful seat. The passenger in 3A will need to be reseated," Derrick pointed out. The standby passenger quickly gathered her belongings. "Of course, I completely understand. I'm so sorry about all this." As the cabin reorganized, Derrick kept his arm around Jamal's shoulders, grounding him in the chaos. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Jamal nodded, emotion making speech difficult. The combination of humiliation, vindication, and his father's unwavering support created a storm of feelings he wasn't prepared to process. Tyler Bradshaw rose again, this time with a different demeanor. "Mr. Washington, I'd like to apologize to your son. My behavior was inexcusable." Derrick's expression remained impassive. "It's not me you need to apologize to." Bradshaw turned to Jamal, visibly uncomfortable. "Young man, I'm sorry for my role in what happened. I made assumptions I shouldn't have made." Jamal looked the man directly in the eyes. "Thank you for your apology, Mr. Bradshaw. I accept it, but I won't forget it." Derrick squeezed his son's shoulder, pride swelling in his chest at Jamal's dignity under pressure. In that moment, surrounded by the consequences of racism and the power to fight it, father and son shared an understanding deeper than words could express. On Derrick's tablet, emails were already pouring in. Security footage had been secured. Atlantic Airways CEO Patricia Reynolds was requesting an immediate video conference. Social media was beginning to pick up the story from passenger accounts. What had begun as a routine act of discrimination was transforming into something much bigger, a catalyst for change that would extend far beyond one flight, one airline, or one family's experience. The next 30 minutes unfolded with the precision of a corporate takeover. Heather, Brian, and Captain Maxwell were quietly escorted off the aircraft, their faces ashen as they passed through the first-class cabin. Security Officer Keith followed shortly after, avoiding eye contact with the Washingtons. In their places came a new crew, briefed and apologetic, led by a black female captain named Regina Daniels. "Mr. Washington, Jamal," Captain Daniels greeted them, her handshake firm and her gaze direct. "On behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to personally apologize for your experience today. I assure you this is being addressed at the highest levels." Tyler Bradshaw was also removed from the flight, though not by airline staff. Two men in suits, security from Lancaster Financial, summoned by a single phone call from Derrick, arrived to escort him from the plane. "Lancaster takes diversity and inclusion very seriously, Mr. Washington," one of them explained quietly. "Mr. Bradshaw will be placed on administrative leave pending an investigation." As the new crew prepared for departure, Jamal was returned to his original seat, 3A, with upgraded service that bordered on obsequious. The first-class flight attendant, Michael, offered him a tablet loaded with premium movies, noise-canceling headphones, and a selection of gourmet snacks. "It's not necessary," Jamal told him, feeling uncomfortable with the special treatment. Actually, it is, Michael replied with genuine warmth. First class is about exceptional service for every passenger. You deserve nothing less. Outside the aircraft, at the gate area, a small group of media representatives had gathered, tipped off by social media posts from passengers. News of a major airline removing a black teenager from first class, only to have his CEO father board and cause a staff shakeup, was spreading rapidly. Atlantic Airways is making a serious mistake if they think this will blow over, Derrick told Dennis Parker as they stood in the jetway. I want a formal investigation, anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, and a review of your protocols for handling passenger complaints. Dennis nodded rapidly. Ms. Reynolds is already assembling a task force. She'd like to speak with you directly once you land in Boston. Tell her I'll be available at 4 p.m., Derrick replied. And Dennis? This isn't going away. My attorneys will be in touch about a formal discrimination complaint. Back on the plane, Jamal found himself at the center of unexpected support. The lawyer, Stephanie Morris, had moved to the seat across the aisle. Jamal, I'd like to offer my services pro bono if you and your father decide to pursue legal action, she said, handing him her business card. What happened to you is textbook discrimination, and I specialize in these cases. Thank you, ma'am, Jamal replied, still processing the whirlwind of events. From the row behind him, Doris Jenkins leaned forward. Young man, I taught high school for 45 years. I've seen brilliant minds like yours held back by prejudice too many times. Don't let this deter you from your path. No, ma'am, Jamal assured her with a small smile. If anything, it's motivated me more. From economy class, Aisha Johnson made her way forward during the continued boarding delay. The flight attendants, hyper-aware of the situation, made no move to stop her. Hey, she said, reaching Jamal's seat. I just wanted to say I've been through similar stuff. It never stops hurting, but it does make you stronger. You handled yourself with real dignity back there. Thanks, Jamal replied, genuinely touched by her solidarity. I'm Jamal. Aisha. I'm headed to Boston University for my master's program. If you need a friendly face in Boston while you're at MIT, here's my number. She scribbled on a napkin and passed it to him. As Aisha returned to her seat, Derrick boarded the plane again, having completed his discussion with airline management. The passengers, now aware of his identity and influence, watched with newfound respect as he took the seat beside his son. Everything okay? Jamal asked quietly. Derrick nodded. It will be. Atlantic Airways is about to become a case study in how not to handle diversity issues. He paused, studying his son's face. How are you holding up? Jamal considered the question seriously. I'm processing. It happened so fast. 1 minute I was excited about MIT, the next I was being treated like I'd stolen something. I know that feeling, Derrick admitted, a rare moment of vulnerability from the usually stoic CEO. Your grandfather faced it. I face it. I hoped things would be different for you. You always taught me to handle racism with dignity, Jamal said. But today you came in like a father protecting his son, Derrick finished. There's a time for dignity, Jamal, and there's a time for righteous anger. The trick is knowing which moment you're in. As the new crew completed preparations for departure, Derrick's phone buzzed with texts and emails. The incident was trending on Twitter. #FirstClassWhileBlack had begun trending nationally, with passengers sharing their videos and accounts. This isn't just about us anymore, Derrick observed, showing Jamal the hashtag. It's about every person of color who's been made to feel they don't belong in spaces they've earned the right to occupy. So what do we do now? Jamal asked. Derrick smiled, a determined glint in his eye. Now we turn this moment into a movement. Ready for that? Jamal straightened in his seat, his father's strength reinforcing his own. Ready. As the plane finally pushed back from the gate, nearly an hour behind schedule, Jamal looked out the window at the airport where his morning had begun with such optimism, been derailed by bigotry, and was now transforming into something entirely unexpected, a platform for change. Next to him, Derrick was already drafting an email to his PR team, his legal department, and his diversity officer. The subject line read simply, "Time for change." At 35,000 feet, the atmosphere in first class had transformed. What began as a space of exclusion for Jamal had become a forum for unexpected connections and conversations about race in America. The new crew, hyper-aware of the situation, provided impeccable service while giving the Washington space to process the morning's events. Stephanie Morris had moved to the seat directly behind Jamal and Derrick, occasionally leaning forward to offer legal insights or ask thoughtful questions about their experience. "The footage your son captured is compelling evidence," she explained during a lull in the flight. "Combined with the security cameras and multiple witness statements, you have a textbook case of discrimination." "We're not just after a settlement," Derrick clarified. "We want systemic change." Stephanie nodded appreciatively. "That's where the real impact happens. I'd be honored to help craft remedial actions beyond monetary damages." In seat 2B, a tech entrepreneur who had witnessed the entire incident tentatively approached. "Mr. Washington. Kevin John. I founded Blue Wave Solutions." He extended his hand, which Derrick shook. "I just wanted to say I admire how you handled this situation. As another minority in tech, I've faced similar barriers, though never quite so blatant." "Thank you for your support," Derrick replied. "The tech world has its own diversity challenges." "Absolutely," Kevin agreed. "Actually, I've been following your company's initiatives in this area. I'd love to discuss potential collaboration on increasing minority representation in STEM fields." As they exchanged contact information, Jamal observed the networking with growing understanding. His father was transforming a moment of injustice into connections and opportunities. Not just for themselves, but potentially for many others. From economy class, several passengers made their way forward during the flight to express support. The airline crew, under strict instructions to accommodate the Washingtons in every way, allowed these brief interactions. Aisha Johnson returned with two of her friends, all headed to Boston University's graduate programs. "We started a group chat about what happened," she told Jamal. "Everyone's talking about how you stood your ground. It's inspiring." "I just did what my parents taught me," Jamal replied, still uncomfortable with being cast as a symbol. "That's exactly the point," one of Aisha's friends, Marcus, added. "You shouldn't have had to face that situation at all. The fact that your parents had to prepare you for it is what people need to understand." Throughout the flight, Derrick balanced his attention between strategic calls and messages, his phone permitted to remain on through special authorization, and meaningful conversations with his son. During a quiet moment, he turned to Jamal with an unusually hesitant expression. "I've been thinking about whether I've given you the right advice all these years," he admitted. "Teaching you to rise above racism, to always be the bigger person. I wonder if I should have taught you more about how to fight it directly." Jamal considered this thoughtfully. "I think you taught me both, Dad. Today I used what you've always told me. Document everything, maintain dignity, know your rights. The only difference is you were here to back me up." "I won't always be there," Derrick said softly. "No," Jamal agreed. "But you've given me the tools to handle it. And today, you showed me when it's time to stop accommodating injustice and start demanding change." As the plane began its descent into Boston Logan International Airport, the pilot's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our approach into Boston. Current weather is sunny, 68 degrees. Local time is 1:45 p.m. On behalf of Atlantic Airways, I want to apologize for our delayed departure. Atlantic Airways is committed to providing a respectful, inclusive environment for all passengers. We fell short of that commitment today, and for that, we are truly sorry." The unusual announcement, clearly directed at the Washingtons without naming them, caused a ripple of murmurs throughout the cabin. When the plane touched down, Captain Daniels made one final announcement: "Passengers, we ask that you remain seated temporarily while our special guests deplane first." Derrick immediately shook his head and pressed the call button. When the flight attendant arrived, he said firmly, "We appreciate the gesture, but will deplane in the normal sequence. No special treatment is necessary." The decision earned respectful nods from nearby passengers, who recognized the statement it made: the Washingtons weren't asking for preferential treatment, only equal treatment. As they exited the aircraft, Derrick and Jamal were met at the gate by a small contingent of airline executives, led by a woman in a sharp suit who introduced herself as Patricia Reynolds, CEO of Atlantic Airways. "Mr. Washington, Jamal, I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for your experience today," she began, her tone both professional and genuinely contrite. "Ms. Reynolds," Derrick acknowledged with a formal nod. "I appreciate you meeting us personally. As I mentioned to your operations manager, my legal team will be in touch about formal discrimination charges." "Of course," she nodded. "We fully expect that and will cooperate completely. In the meantime, I want you to know we've already placed the involved staff on administrative leave pending investigation, and we're implementing emergency anti-bias training for all customer-facing personnel." As they spoke, Jamal noticed a small group of reporters and camera crews gathering nearby, alerted by the viral social media posts from passengers. "Dad," he said quietly, nodding toward the media. Derrick followed his gaze and sighed. "I was hoping to shield you from this part." "It's okay," Jamal said with surprising confidence. "If we're going to make this a movement, people need to hear what happened, right?" Pride swelled in Derrick's chest at his son's maturity. "Right. But we do this strategically. No individual interviews today. One brief statement, then we focus on why you're really here, MIT." As they approached the gathered media, Derrick addressed Patricia once more. "Ms. Reynolds, Atlantic Airways has an opportunity here. You can fight this and become another case study in corporate denial, or you can lead the industry in acknowledging the problem and implementing real change." Patricia met his gaze directly. "Mr. Washington, I built my career breaking glass ceilings. I have no intention of defending discrimination in my airline. I'd welcome your input on our response and remediation." With that understanding reached, Derrick and Jamal turned to face the cameras, stepping together into a spotlight neither had sought, but both were prepared to use for something greater than themselves. The conference room on the 30th floor of Atlantic Airways headquarters hummed with tension. 24 hours after the incident, key players from multiple departments sat around a massive mahogany table, eyes fixed on the video playing on the wall screen. Jamal Washington, being escorted from his rightful first-class seat while passengers watched in uncomfortable silence. Patricia Reynolds, CEO of Atlantic Airways, paused the footage with a click of her remote. The frozen image of Jamal's dignity in the face of humiliation spoke volumes. "This," she said into the silence, "is a defining moment for Atlantic Airways. How we respond will determine whether we're seen as part of the problem or leaders in the solution." At the other end of the table, Derrick Washington sat with perfect posture, flanked by his Chief Diversity Officer, Maya Patel, and his lead counsel, James Rodriguez. Though Jamal had been invited to participate, Derrick had insisted his son focus on the MIT program, the original purpose of his journey. "Mr. Washington," Patricia continued, "the floor is yours." Derrick rose, buttoning his suit jacket with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to boardroom presentations. But today was different. Today wasn't about quarterly projections or merger strategies. Today was about his son. "Thank you, Ms. Reynolds," he began, his deep voice commanding attention without effort. "I've spent 20 years building a technology company in an industry not known for its diversity. In that time, I've developed a simple test for determining whether an organization is serious about addressing bias or just engaging in performative allyship. He paused, looking each person in the eye before continuing. The test is this. When confronted with evidence of discrimination, do you defend, deflect, and minimize? Or do you acknowledge, repair, and transform? He gestured to the frozen image on the screen. My son deserves more than apologies and sensitivity training. He deserves systemic change. For the next 30 minutes, Derrick outlined a comprehensive plan developed overnight by his team. It included mandatory blind customer service audits, an independent review board for discrimination complaints, revised protocols for passenger disputes, leadership diversity goals tied to executive compensation, and a multi-million-dollar scholarship fund for minority students pursuing aviation careers. As he concluded, the room sat in stunned silence, not at the boldness of his proposals, but at their practicality. These weren't the demands of an angry parent seeking retribution. They were the considered recommendations of a business leader who understood both corporate realities and moral imperatives. Patricia was the first to speak. These are substantial changes, Mr. Washington. Substantial problems require substantial solutions, Derrick replied evenly. Implementation would be costly and complex. More costly than the lawsuit my legal team is prepared to file. More complex than explaining to your shareholders why Atlantic Airways became the poster child for corporate racism. Derrick's tone remained conversational, but his message was clear. Patricia held his gaze for a long moment, then surprised everyone with a smile. You misunderstand me, Mr. Washington. I'm not pushing back, I'm impressed. With your permission, I'd like to implement these proposals not just as remediation for this incident, but as the foundation for a complete overhaul of our approach to inclusion. The tension in the room shifted to something more productive, the creative energy of problem solving. As the meeting progressed, executives who had entered defensively now leaned forward with engagement, offering additional ideas and resources. Meanwhile, across town at MIT, Jamal was experiencing his own form of systemic response. News of the incident had preceded him, and the program directors had reached out immediately with support. We're appalled by what you experienced, Jamal, Dr. Eliza Chen, the program coordinator, told him during their welcome meeting. Please know that you are not only welcome here, you are exactly the kind of student we want at MIT. Jamal appreciated the support but found himself uncomfortable with the extra attention. He hadn't come to Boston to be known as that kid from the plane. He'd come to demonstrate his abilities in robotics and artificial intelligence. Thank you, Dr. Chen, he replied carefully. But I'd really prefer to focus on the program itself. I've been working on a machine learning algorithm that I'm excited to develop further. Dr. Chen studied him with newfound respect. Of course. Though I hope you'll consider speaking to our Student Diversity Council at some point. Your perspective would be valuable. Jamal considered this. His father had always emphasized the importance of opening doors for others once you manage to get through them yourself. I'd be happy to, after the main project work is complete, he agreed. As Jamal settled into his dormitory that evening, his phone buzzed with messages. His MIT peers, initially cautious, had quickly welcomed him into their study groups once they discovered his genuine passion and knowledge. But it was a message from his father that caught his attention. Proud of you, son. The meeting went better than expected. Atlantic Airways is implementing all our recommendations, plus adding their own. Change happens when preparation meets opportunity. Call me after dinner. Jamal smiled, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. The humiliation of the previous day hadn't disappeared, but it was being transformed into something constructive, something that might prevent another young person from experiencing what he had. As he began to reply, another message came through, this one from an unknown number. Jamal, this is Heather from yesterday's flight. I was given your contact information by the airline's HR department as part of the reconciliation process. I want to apologize personally for my actions. They were inexcusable. I've spent the last 24 hours confronting uncomfortable truths about my own biases. I'm beginning anti-racism training tomorrow. Nothing can undo what I did, but I wanted you to know it's changing me. Jamal stared at the message, conflicting emotions swirling through him. Part of him wanted to ignore it, to let Heather sit with her discomfort. Another part recognized the courage it took to reach out directly. After careful consideration, he typed a response. Thank you for your apology. I hope your training helps you grow. What happened to me happens to people of color every day without cameras or CEO fathers to intervene. Remember that, and do better. As he pressed send, Jamal felt a sense of closure, not because all was forgiven, but because he had claimed his voice in the narrative. He wasn't just a victim in a viral video, he was an agent of change in his own right. Back in the corporate boardroom, as the meeting concluded, Patricia Reynolds extended her hand to Derrick. Your son is fortunate to have you as an advocate, she observed. No, Derrick corrected her. The fortune is mine, having such a son. Jamal handled himself with extraordinary dignity yesterday. My intervention shouldn't have been necessary. But it was, Patricia acknowledged. And that's on us, on all of us who have the power to change these systems but haven't done enough. She hesitated, then added, my grandfather was a Tuskegee airman. He faced discrimination even in uniform. He would be disappointed to know the industry he helped pioneer still struggles with these issues 70 years later. Then let's make him proud, Derrick replied, accepting her handshake. Not with words or promises, but with actions and results. As Derrick left the building, his phone rang with a call from Washington Tech's marketing director, alerting him to the mounting media requests for interviews. The story had grown beyond the incident itself to spark national conversation about privilege, corporate responsibility, and racial bias in customer service. What's our position on interview requests? The director asked. Derrick considered this as he gazed out at the Boston skyline, thinking of his son across town, brilliant and resilient despite the burden society placed on his young shoulders. Our position is progress over publicity, Derrick decided. We'll do one major interview, jointly with Atlantic Airways, after their new policies are implemented. The story isn't what happened yesterday, it's what changes tomorrow. 6 months later, the MIT Summer STEM program culminated in its traditional student symposium. The auditorium buzzed with energy as parents, faculty, and industry representatives gathered to hear presentations from the program's exceptional young minds. Dr. Eliza Chen approached the podium, her smile broad as she addressed the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special keynote presenter today. When he joined us 6 months ago, circumstances thrust him into an unexpected spotlight. He could have allowed that incident to define him or distract him. Instead, he channeled that experience into remarkable work. His project on algorithmic bias in artificial intelligence has already been accepted for publication in next month's Journal of Ethical Computing. Please welcome Jamal Washington. The applause was thunderous as Jamal took the stage. At 16, he stood tall in a charcoal suit that mirrored his father's executive style, yet with subtle personalizations. A vibrant blue tie, a lapel pin representing black excellence in STEM, that established his own identity. Thank you, Dr. Chen, Jamal began, his voice steady and confident. 6 months ago, I boarded a plane expecting to focus on coding and robotics when I arrived at MIT. Instead, I found myself at the center of a national conversation about who belongs in which spaces and who gets to decide. He paused, scanning the audience until he found his parents. Trinity's eyes shining with tears of pride, Derrick nodding encouragement. That experience taught me something crucial about technology: systems reflect the biases of their creators. Whether it's an airline's customer service protocols or a facial recognition algorithm, bias gets embedded unless we actively prevent it. For the next 15 minutes, Jamal presented his research with the precision and insight of someone far beyond his years. He demonstrated how common AI systems often misidentified or miscategorized people of color, how automated decision-making could reinforce existing inequalities, and most importantly, how these issues could be addressed through intentional design and diverse development teams. In the front row, Derrick watched with a father's unique mixture of pride and wonder. The young man commanding the stage with such authority was still his son. The boy who collected robot kits and stayed up too late reading, but also something more, a voice for change in his own right. As Jamal concluded his presentation to enthusiastic applause, Dr. Chen returned to the podium. Before we move to questions, we have a special announcement. Atlantic Airways has established the Equity in Aviation Scholarship, specifically for underrepresented students interested in both aviation and technology. Their CEO, Patricia Reynolds, is here to tell us more. Patricia approached the stage, shaking Jamal's hand warmly before addressing the crowd. 6 months ago, a failure in our system revealed biases we needed to confront. Today, I'm pleased to report that Atlantic Airways has completely redesigned our training, complaint resolution, and customer service protocols. She turned to Jamal. Your dignity in the face of discrimination challenged us to be better. This scholarship is just one result. Patricia went on to detail the program. 10 full scholarships annually for minority students pursuing aviation or aviation-adjacent technology degrees, with guaranteed internships and mentorship opportunities. From his seat, Derrick observed the transformation unfolding before him. The incident that had filled him with rage had catalyzed genuine change. Atlantic Airways had implemented every recommendation from that boardroom meeting, plus additional measures of their own. Employee satisfaction had actually increased under the new, more equitable systems. And their stock had risen 3% following positive press about their diversity initiatives. After the symposium, the Washington family gathered with Dr. Chen and several industry representatives who were eager to discuss both Jamal's research and the family's advocacy work. Jamal, we'd be interested in having you intern with our ethics division next summer, offered the CTO of a major tech firm. Your perspective on algorithmic bias would be invaluable. Thank you, sir, Jamal replied. I'd like to see the specific projects your team is working on before I decide. Derrick smiled at his son's polite but firm response, not jumping at the first opportunity, but evaluating it thoughtfully. The confidence to make such a request of a C-suite executive reflected growth born from adversity. Later that evening, the family celebrated at a restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor. Trinity, who had flown in for the symposium, raised her glass in a toast. To my brilliant, resilient son, she said, her voice warm with emotion. And to my husband, who showed the world that a father's love is a force to be reckoned with. Jamal smiled at his parents. Thanks for having my back. Both of you, always. We always will, Derrick assured him. But I'm equally proud of how you've developed your own voice these past months. It was true. In the aftermath of the incident, Jamal had started a mentorship program pairing MIT students with Black and Latino high schoolers interested in STEM fields. The program had already expanded to 3 Boston-area schools, with plans for further growth. I've been thinking, Jamal said, setting down his water glass. About that day on the plane. His parents exchanged glances, giving him space to continue. It was humiliating, Jamal acknowledged. But looking back, I realize it taught me something important. Dad always said systems don't change unless they're challenged. Now I understand what that really means. Derrick nodded thoughtfully. Systems resist change, that's their nature. It takes a disruption to create an opening for transformation. Exactly, Jamal agreed. And while I never want to experience that kind of discrimination again, I'm not sorry it happened. It changed me. Made me more determined to create technology that's fair for everyone. As dinner concluded, Derrick received a text message from Patricia Reynolds, watched the live stream of Jamal's presentation. Extraordinary young man. First class in every sense that matters. Derrick showed the message to Jamal, who smiled quietly. The next morning, they would board another Atlantic Airways flight home, first class again, but this time with a different meaning attached to those premium seats. Not as a shield against discrimination, but as a space they had helped transform through their advocacy. At the airport the following day, Jamal noticed subtle but significant changes. The security staff were more consistent in their screening procedures across passengers of all backgrounds. The gate agents made eye contact and offered the same courteous greetings to everyone. When they boarded, the first-class flight attendant welcomed Jamal by name, her genuine smile a stark contrast to Heather's suspicious glare 6 months earlier. "Mr. Washington, it's an honor to have you with us today," she said. "I'm Renee, and I'll be taking care of you during our flight to Dallas." As they settled into their seats, Derrick observed his son. Not a victim, not a symbol, but a young man of exceptional character who had faced injustice with dignity and helped transform it into progress. "Ready to go home?" Derrick asked. Jamal nodded, gazing out the window at the Boston skyline. "Home, then forward," he replied. "There's still a lot of work to do." Derrick smiled, recognizing in his son's words the perfect combination of acknowledgement and aspiration, of realism and hope, the balanced perspective that real change required. As the plane accelerated down the runway, father and son sat side by side, their shared experience having forged an even stronger bond between them. They had transformed a moment of discrimination into a movement for equity, not through vengeance or victimhood, but through strategic advocacy and unwavering dignity. The incident that began with a black boy being kicked out of first class had indeed changed everything. Not just for one family or one airline, but for the countless others who would benefit from the ripples of transformation still spreading outward from that pivotal moment. What would you have done in Derrick's position? Would you have confronted the airline and demanded systemic change, or handled things differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of dignity and transformation in the face of discrimination resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life stories. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that one person's stand against injustice can create waves of positive change. Thank you for watching, and remember, true first class isn't about where you sit, it's about how you stand up for what's right. This powerful narrative teaches us that confronting racism requires both dignity and strategic action. While Jamal maintained his composure during humiliation, Derrick's intervention showed that systemic change often needs power to challenge power. The story highlights how discrimination persists regardless of status, education, or achievement, but also demonstrates that transformation is possible when addressed at both personal and institutional levels. The Washington family's approach offers a blueprint: document everything, know your rights, maintain dignity, but don't hesitate to demand accountability. Their strategic response, seeking not just compensation but comprehensive policy changes, transformed an individual injustice into collective progress. Perhaps most importantly, this story reveals how racism isn't just about hateful individuals but about systems that perpetuate bias. Changing Atlantic Airways required addressing protocols, training, leadership incentives, and organizational culture. True transformation happens when we move beyond apologies to redesigning the systems themselves. Finally, we learn that advocacy isn't just about fighting against injustice but building towards something better, like Jamal's mentorship program and research on algorithmic bias, creating positive ripples far beyond his personal experience. What systems around you need challenging? Have you ever witnessed discrimination but stayed silent like many passengers on that flight? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of courage and transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives that expose uncomfortable truths in our society. Your engagement helps spread these important messages to those who need to hear them. Share this video with someone struggling to find their voice against injustice. Sometimes knowing you're not alone makes all the difference. Thank you for watching, and remember, true change requires both compassion for those affected by discrimination and courage to confront the systems that allow it to persist.